Okay.
Okay, I'm going to call a special council meeting to order.
Hey, Karen.
Need to pull up the agenda. Can you post one on the agenda? Okay, we're called to order, looking for an adoption of the agenda. Councillor Blatt, those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Perfect. Item 3, new and unfinished business, notice of special council meeting.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of council. This meeting has been called to address changes since council's decision or discussion on June 14th, 2020 related to the homeless shelter. Given the discussions at the June 14th meeting, administration has engaged the other orders of government on several levels to try and gain support for required services within our community that include lobbying efforts, meetings, and tours of the community. And this work continues. Given the civil unrest that has been occurring in our community recently, a request from the RCMP came in to try and find a solution to diffuse this situation. As you know, city administration has applied the enforcements available, and this process takes time. As the community continues to escalate their concerns with the current situation, administration and the RCMP are becoming increasingly concerned for the safety of our citizens. Currently, FCSS has been directed by council to find a city-owned parcel that could house a temporary warming shelter. Administration has previously discussed with council the location along 37A Avenue west of 56th Street as a viable location. This short-term solution was intended to allow the Guiding Coalition on Homelessness time to develop a long-term solution and location that may be at this location or another location in the city that is yet to be determined and discussed by council. It will take time for them to develop out this work. And in the meantime, this location seems appropriate to support Inspector Durance's proposal. Inspector Durance is here today to walk you through a plan he has developed to move Tent City to what could be a short to long-term solution or location that FCSS may settle on as directed by council in the future.
Thank you, Sue.
Thank you.
So just as a preamble, I put together some statistics with regards to calls of service that we've received in and around the area of Rock Soup since the closure of the support hub starting on August the 9th through the 18th. We've received a total of 26 complaints ranging from assault with a weapon, complaints under the Drugs and Substances Act, crime prevention, harassment, disturbing the peace, 2 of those, harassment, communication, lost and found property, municipal bylaw ×3, theft under ×2, suspicious persons, trespassing act, and uttering threats. We've continued our patrols that we were doing in and around the 24-hour support hub, and we've just moved our patrols into in and around the Rock Soup area. We've conducted 23 business contacts, 135 subject contacts, 195 vehicle patrols, 16 foot patrols, and there have been 4 arrests since the start of August 9th. That's just a summary of some of the calls for service we received in the area. I put together a very, very brief presentation on a proposed course of action. Next slide, please. So as we move forward and we look for solutions in this, there are 3 different options that I see police taking any action in relation to Rock Soup and or the occupants of the private land just north of the tree line in the vacant lot just north of Rock Soup. One is negotiate a peaceful and cooperative movement of the occupants to another location. Subject agreed to leave and not return will find their own way. Rock Soup RCMP bylaw services assist with the relocation to an alternate site. May require the use of a bus or other transportation to assist in the move of persons and their effects. In speaking with Craig at Rock Soup a couple of days ago, I proposed this item 1 to him, and in principle, he was in agreement with that if we could find a suitable location to move the occupants from Rock Soup. Next slide, please. Next to that, the next course of action would be persons on the north property are served with a trespass notice and are ordered to leave the property, as the tents and occupants on the vacant lot just north of Rock Soup are in fact trespassing. We've received a letter from the property owner saying they do not wish these people on that property. At this particular juncture, we have not taken any enforcement action. And at that particular juncture, the following could transpire. The subjects agree to leave and not to return. They find their own way. Subjects refuse to leave and are arrested under the Trespass Act and are removed. Charges may or may not result. Rock Soup RCMP bylaw may wish to assist in relocation to an alternate site at that point in time. May require the use of a bus or any transportation to help move these people to another location. Next slide, please. Stage 3 would be a full removal of all the occupants of both the property to the north as well as the occupants of Rock Soup. This would be the kind of the worst case scenario. A formal Queen's Bench order is received. All occupants on the north property and Rock Soup property are ordered to leave the property by property rep or by the RCMP. If they leave on their own, then number 1 and number 2 examples can be applied. If the subjects refuse to leave, the subject on the north property arrested under the Trespass Act and may face charges. All occupants on Rock Soup contravening the bylaw are arrested for breach of a court order and removed from the property. Rock Soup RCMP bylaw may wish to assist with that, and we may need some transportation to assist in relocating. If such subjects need to be removed by force, a significant police effort and presence will be required. This will be the most undesirable course of action. And I can't stress that enough. This is not where we want to go. We want to find a solution mutual to all parties involved. Next slide, please. Okay. Regardless of the course of action, the plan needs to be placed for a location for these people to go. I've stressed this in a meeting that we had once before, how we deal with some of our homeless folks in town. If they're loitering or whatever, one of the big things that they do say to us is, sorry, you can't stay here anymore. You have to move on. Well, where do I go? And often is the case, if we don't have an alternate location for those folks to go to, then we're left with, well, I don't really know where you can go, just don't stay here. And it just becomes a move along, keep moving along piece. It's not conducive to the charter. It's not conducive to our harmonious community either. If they're allowed to go on their, if the folks are allowed to go on their way from the encampment, they just may recamp somewhere else. And this is a concern of mine because we have significant pressures on the community where we're located right now. If we don't have an alternate site for folks to go to, then they're just going to find another place to encamp. And we could find ourselves faced with the same issue again, but in another location, just in another location in the city. So I need to stress that we need to have a solution. We need to have a place for these folks to go prior to moving them along one way or the other. Next slide. Maybe we can get that map if we could, please, Karen. Can you put it to Google Earth by chance, or photo? Sorry. Okay. So I've discussed with Sue and our sergeant in bylaw, and we've discussed a site on the southwest side of Walmart, which is city-owned property. From our look at all the available city land that may be vacant and may be able to occupy some people in tents or in a variety of different building formats, this is probably one of the least intrusive of all the sites in the city. It maintains the folks in the city so that they can receive any supports or any counseling or any services that they may require within the city, yet keeps the pressures off of the residential communities and some of the local businesses. So the area in which we're talking about is the green space just to the left of the Walmart superstore. If you can bring your cursor just a little over, a little bit down, a little bit further, right there, up a little higher, right on the end of the roadway. So just a little bit to the left of that is the area we're proposing. It's flat, it's grassed. The grass is a little high at this point. I walked through it not today, but yesterday. It's about knee deep, the grass, and there's some small bush and that sort of stuff in that area. Another alternate site that we did discuss is at the north end of that same block of property at the end of 37th Avenue. And that 37th Avenue would be in the same, more or less, latitude there, or line, the north side of that block. Now, go back to my slide, if you could, please. There are other vacant pieces of land within the city, but they're a long way away from any services. They're a long way away from any needs that this community group might need. And or they're a significant way through residential areas to get to those needs that they might need. So the needs on the site would be to cut the grass to delineate an area that's subject to an occupy. There's a property line there. I believe it's the Denhams that own the property immediately to the west. So I'm suggesting we go in with a large mower and mow the grass down so that it's comfortable and that it would be delineated on here's an area in which you can stay. I suggest portable toilets will absolutely need to be required to be brought in. The total number is to be determined. I don't know how many people would occupy the space, but that would delineate that. Garbage dumpster, portable shower unit. I understand that there may or may not be one available, but that would be probably step 2 in this plan. A fire pit or a fire ring to be placed, and or portable wind fencing, determining how long the occupants might be there. There's not a significant amount of trees there in order to be a proper windbreak. Next slide. I've consulted with some of the local business areas in an immediate area. I did that yesterday and today. I've talked to the proprietors at Walmart, Tim Hortons, Value Liquor, Discount Pond, Canadian Tire, and the Wetaskiwin Mall Security. Most are in agreement that we need to do something. There needs to be a location. They weren't happy that we would be relocating the camp to that location. However, they weren't adversely saying no way, this can't happen. So I explained to them that our course of action would be, if we have this encampment in one specific location, then it eases the police in and also security efforts, and also enables us to control some of the traffic coming and going from that particular site. In that, if we can get into the area with our police cars, then we can patrol the area on a regular basis and continue our continued foot patrols and also vehicle patrols in relation. But not only that, but in this location, it's slightly remote because it's at the very edge of the city, and there would be no real significant need for general public to be going into that area unless they're there for a significant purpose, either to pick someone up, to bring something to the camp, or to bring services or whatever. And then we can eliminate some of that pressure between members of the general public that have gone to Rock Suit to start trouble there and or start arguments and things like that. So from a security aspect, it's a little easier for us to maintain the security of both the occupants of the camp and also to keep other members of the public from going into that area for any non-reasonable need. That's the end of my presentation. I'm open to your questions. I'm open to another location that you might have that we can discuss. Again, I was in keeping with this location is that it's less intrusive to pretty much all the occupants of the city of Wetaskiwin, and then we can alleviate the pressures on not only the people that are staying in the camp, but also the general public and the businesses in Wetaskiwin.
We need a motion to accept this as information. I move that we accept this report from Keith as information. Thank you. A lot of questions, Keith. One, by moving these people here, do we have a limit on quantity?
As space allows, I would suggest. I don't know how many occupants are in camp at this particular time. I'm guessing there's about 20 tents. If you put 2 people in each tent, then it'd be about 40 to 50 people. Dealing with the number of folks that were utilizing the 24-hour support hub prior to, I think the numbers we were talking about were from 40 to 60 people were using it as an overnight stay, depending, like that number would fluctuate up and down. I appreciate the information I have here is limited. I just put it together here this morning. So I appreciate the fact that we may be just moving the problem from one place to another. I appreciate that very much. But for myself and from the policing standpoint, we need to get the folks in a position where they're not in very close proximity to the residents that are causing the pressure there. And there's a polar opposite of views on within the community on these folks staying on this piece of property.
So, if I may, I got a bunch of questions regarding that. I'm sorry. So if we say 60 people, and we count what's at Tent City right now, including Rock, and we say, bring these people here, what's the guarantee is that we ain't gonna have 100 by the end of the month?
No guarantee. However, in keeping with the number that there's no guarantee, sir, that we wouldn't have 100. But based on the needs of what we've seen and the number of people that are choosing to stay in the camp now, I'm thinking we'll be close to that number. The other piece here is if we enact the bylaw and we also enact the trespass notice on the property and we just move these people off the properties and just let them go where they want, they can go where they want. We can't, unless they're in custody, they will be able to move to where they want to go. However, I feel that there's no stopping them from going up and camping on the property at the hospital or somewhere else in town that may be less desirable.
So it's really struggling because I'm writing things here and I said, do we need to ask these people where they're from? If they're from our residents, how far? I don't know if you have that right to ask them or take pictures of them, because somebody's got to have an address to these people. If we say 50, okay, 50, but in a month from now, if we're opening the doors to have a tent city, second Wetaskiwin tent city, and we're getting everybody from outside our area to come in, that's not our homeless. That's not our vulnerable. And that's going to be very frustrating for our community, especially to me. Because, okay, if you said 50 people, if we had 30 tents or anything in there, and all of a sudden, come the end of August, we have 100 people, and we're supporting this. You know, the only thing we haven't given him here is free food, and we don't know where these people are going to get their food from.
Yep.
If they can get food, they're obviously got money to buy something. Are these local residents? If you said these 50 people are local residents, we take care of our locals, but are we going to get people bussed in? We don't know that because you're not going to be there. And we as taxpayers, we're tasking our fork in the bill. Fine, we we said we need to solve this problem, but to solve the problem and enticing, I feel we're opening the door to, hey, free food, free party in Wetaskiwin, let's go.
Good.
And my other question that's frustrating, reading this, you're asking for extra patrols and patrols. What happened to the extra patrols when we had it downtown? All of a sudden, you're finding time for these police officers to come out here and monitor these people. Why couldn't we have had a monitor when we were downtown?
We did.
So,
The same patrols that we're providing now will be just moved to that location.
okay, thank you.
I'm not asking for any additional officers. I'm not asking for any additional money for funding
Okay.
on that.
And, but my concern is, like I said, I don't know if human rights or whatever allows us to, when these people are coming in, your name, your address, where you come from. Because if they come from Lethbridge, why we having them here?
Appreciate that, sir. As far as identifying these people, the only time we would be in a position to formally identify them would be if they were taken into custody. We could ask them to leave, and if they just get up and they leave, then they don't need to identify themselves.
One more question. You've shown us the picture. One of those locations is located on Moose's land. It's not, that's not city property.
I
too.
believe the only thing I'm talking about is what's on, I'm not talking about anybody else's land. I'm only talking.
Just
about-
on where, okay, because the arrow was pointing to the
Sorry,
wrong one.
no.
Okay, and you contacted a whole bunch of businesses, but did you contact Castle?
I haven't got, I was running all morning trying to
Okay.
get more consultation in, and I ran out of time. I didn't get to all the businesses on the south end.
Okay, no, and just the only two other big ones there was Denham's, Huckleberry, and the Moosa Group.
Haven't got there yet.
Okay, thank you.
Sue.
Through the chair, working through the chair to Councilor Bronco. I just wanted to highlight too that the things you're speaking about are going to be part of what the Guiding Coalition on Homelessness is going to be working on, identifying all of those pieces. And then they'll be reporting back to council. What Inspector Durant's came to administration on was more about how do we de-escalate the tension in the community right now. Everybody recognizes that this isn't a great solution, but it's better than what we have. So I just wanted to clarify that that information will be coming eventually.
I understand that, Sue, and I really appreciate it. My biggest concern is we got to the 13th or 16th of September. Is this going to escalate when we get to that point? We have 100 tents up there. And then how do you solve that problem? Well, but then, thank you.
Councilor Billingsley.
Thank you. Keith, what you're speaking about is just allowing the tents and the residents or the vulnerable population to move there. This is not setting up a hub that is going to bring people from outside to get the services that either they require or whatever that was there. This is just a place so that they are out of the elements essentially.
On their own accord,
And-
in their own way of
And at
keeping
this
themselves
point,
sheltered, yes.
yeah, and what you're speaking about, there is no services there, or the being talked about it being provided, whether it's food, whether it's any of those other things at this point. That's coming down the road, right? This is just, let's get them out of a residential area where they have a place to at least have some shelter.
And gives them some sense of security and
Sure.
something that they're not going to be told 10 days from now, oh, by the way, you got to go again, right?
Keep
Oh,
moving.
by the way, you can't be here. You can't be there, right?
So to follow up on that then, is your plan then if we allow this? Have you talked about security, whether it's the private security firm, whether it's CPO or whether it's RCMP?
I foresee a blend depending on the tolerances of the municipal budget on you guys are securing a security company now, have secured a security company now. If you want that to continue, that's up to yourself. Part of our thought process on this plan is the fact is if all the folks are in one location, then it's easier for us to patrol. It's one location we need to go to and or wherever there might be pressures in and around that. Again, as I mentioned, we can then also kind of curtail the vehicle traffic going in and out of that area to alleviate members of the public who want to come and cause trouble there. So it's a bit of a buffer that way. The next piece with regards to food and assistance and that sort of stuff, if all these folks are in one location, then those agencies who wish to provide services to those folk can know where they are and can provide that to them. Sure. Instead of looking for everyone all over town.
Thank you.
Counselor Nielsen.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. A couple of questions, if I may. The first one relates to an earlier question, Keith, I asked it at our last council meeting. And I'd like a little more specificity in terms of what the role of the RCMP will be in this proposed project. You talk if it's in one location, it helps the RCMP. And I guess my comment is, it is currently in one location right now, albeit in a residential area, but it is in one location. So nothing changes in terms of the number of locations you have to serve. You also talked about controlling the comings and goings of vehicles to the area. And control is only dependent upon how much time your officers are spending on site. Your vehicles drive away, there is no more control at that point in time until such time as another vehicle comes back. So I guess my question focuses on that whole security piece. And is this a situation where we're looking at responding to complaints? Or is this a really concerted effort to, I'm gonna use the word protect the area, protect the vulnerable population from those people in our community who are angered by it all, and as well as protect those businesses and shoppers in that area. And to me, that speaks more than just we'll run patrols by there every once in a while. And I don't mean to minimize that once in a while, but when you put these people together and you take away food, medication, which they're currently getting at least in some part, their likelihood of greater roaming to solve some of those problems increases, in my mind. And so then I would like to know specifically what kinds of directions you would be providing to your officers to ensure that there is adequate RCMP security on this project.
Well, I think based on the numbers I provided earlier, 23 business contacts, 135 subject contacts, and 195 vehicle patrols and 16 foot patrols inside the and around the Rock Soup area just since the 9th of August speaks to the number of effort that we would be putting to this. We know that there's pressures on the downtown businesses in the South End. If this was to go to that, my direction to my members will be, when you're not busy doing calls for service, that you are in the area significantly. It also allows our bylaw officers, who are also doing the same thing, to be in the area as well. And as I just mentioned to Mr. Billingsley, if the city is maintaining their own private security piece as well, that will also be in place.
My next question, Keith, is with the security or enforcement of the RCMP, CPOs, private security, what rules or regulations or police acts would allow the stopping of vehicles coming into that area?
We have to be careful there with regards to the motoring public. If they're allowed to drive down the back alley of the Walmart because it's actually considered a public highway. But for them to turn and go down that access road down there, I think we could be in a position where, okay, well, why are you coming to this area? We could ask them Would there be any significant enforcement piece there for that? No. Perhaps we could look at something with regards to something under a bylaw or under a trespassing onto city property that's now city controlled property. So it'd be something to that effect we might be able to look at, but it's a significant gray area, Mr. Nielsen, and we're just trying to, again, it's not the best scenario by any stretch of the imagination. It's just a scenario.
And my last question of yourself and the police, I do have some other questions, I think, of Sue, but currently at Rock Soup, as much as the public and myself don't agree with what's happening there, there are attempts to keep open liquor consumption and drug use somewhat out of the public forum. What would be the RCMP's position with regard to open use of those illegal substances while they are on city property in an agreed upon location?
Part of the Liquor Act establishes that if you have purchased liquor in a legal way, it needs to be transported directly to a location in which it can be lawfully consumed. Although it's on city property and the fella is in his tent, it's a temporary residence. It's not unlike when you go to a public or go to a campground where you have your RV out with the awning out and the lawn chair out, and you're having a beverage at your campsite. That is allowed, but you're not allowed to walk down the road inside the campground drinking in public. So if you're at your temporary residence and the awning is out, that's deemed to be a temporary residence and it can be lawfully consumed there. I would probably instruct my members to apply the same principles. It would be the same if they were walking down the street with liquor in their hand. They would be subject to the rules of the Liquor Control Act at that point in time.
Can we take that next step to unlawful?
Same, yeah, drugs would be the same, would have the same principles. Unless it's illicit drugs, but then possession would be illegal.
Say that again, please.
If it's a drug other than marijuana, then it would be subject to the Controlled Drugs and Substances Act and would be illegal and prosecutable.
So this implies to me then, Inspector, that there would be some intent by the RCMP to circulate within that location then. And I'm not talking about patrols, I'm talking about on foot, ensuring that the laws of the land are being upheld?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. And one last question, if I may, Your Worship. My question is for City Manager Sue Howard. Sue, can you tell me what the liability of the city encumbers when if we approve this proposal?
Sure. Through the chair to Councillor Nielsen, the city is always liable, even when we try to take steps to mitigate that. We tend to get named in every lawsuit that happens. So of course, if something were to happen like a fire and it spread and there was damage, the city would absolutely be liable. In speaking with Inspector Durant's, one of the things we would try to do to mitigate some of that liability is to get the grass cut short, disc around the area so that there would be a bit of a fire break, because we know in the past we've had some fires down there. And other than that, I can't see massive liability with this happening. It was happening before. The fire seems to be the biggest liability that I'm worried about, and we would do what we could to mitigate that.
And my last question is to either yourself, Sue, or possibly Mayor Gandam. Has there been consultation More recently, I know Tyler's done a lot of work in terms of trying to do work with some of the other government agencies, but we have our own local MLA who also happens to be a Minister of Indigenous Relations. And I'm wondering what role or input we've had from our MLA and minister on this proposal.
I spoke with Minister Wilson this morning and he supported it, as well as he's working with the Four Nations as well to continue to find a solution to the issue at hand.
Thank you, Your Worship. I stand down.
Councillor Blatz.
Thank you, and thank you to Inspector Durance for your presentation. My main concern that I have right now is for the vulnerable population and their safety, considering the fact that they would now be in an open field, and I am concerned about the safety risk that they have by not having any services nearby or around them, and that the only kind of monitoring that they'll have will be from the police when they do get there and are able to patrol. And I was just wondering what you could see happening as significant safety risk to the vulnerable population, such as unattended overdoses increasing, anything like that. Is there anything that you think you could see increasing significantly by moving locations?
There's a risk of what you're speaking of there, but I am anticipating and I'm hoping, and I've spoken with a couple of different social agencies in town that if we are able to move that there, then they will be nearby to aid in those assistance to those needs. And again, I need to kind of just preface that with the vulnerable population that would be here at that location, or would be moved to that location, or would be willing to move to that location, I should say. At least they're in one location where any other agencies that want to provide services, be it medical, food, clothing, donations, you name it, they at least have a central location where these people can be located. And we're not looking for them all over the city. Mm-hmm. It gives us an opportunity from an enforcement perspective, if we do find someone who's in a vestibule, or who's someone who is truly in an area where they should not be, and they can be then either transported there, or asked to go there, or asked to return there if they're causing problems in and around businesses or whatever. We can just say, listen, you know, you're in a bad spot here. You could be arrested, but we don't want to do that enforcement piece. Maybe head back to your camp, right? We can say, it's just like saying to someone on the street, and I've done it a zillion times in my career, hey, you're out causing no good, you're having a bad day, maybe you should go home. Mm-hmm. Same thing.
So, and kind of further to that, to mitigate the risk of an increase of safety risk to the vulnerable population, the RCMP are going to be working with different agencies and organizations to try and stop that from happening.
Yes, in fact, I just had a meeting earlier this week about trying to rekindle and to reintegrate the mental health and drug diversion program that we started here several weeks ago, albeit on a limited basis based on folks not being in one location.
Thank you very much.
Through the chair to Keith. Monday, we had one of this spokesperson here, and they basically warned us of what she called the honey mood, where basically it just turns into be a big party zone. How are you going to keep it from doing that in that location? Will you, if they start, you know, we're not all naive. There's going to be alcohol. There's going to be drugs down there. But how do you keep them from getting loud and partying and out of control?
we wouldn't, there isn't a whole lot we can do other than keeping the patrols in the area and keeping them curtailed there. Saying, hey, listen, if you're going to be consuming here, you better be in your tent and out of the way. That's a tough one, Mr. Hillgartner, as far as that goes, but, and I understand what the lady was saying. I was here when that comment was made about the honeymoon phase, and I see things increasing, calls for service, things like that in the Rock Soup area as well. So we've been through this piece before. This is a temporary measure. This is not the best solution. I'm just trying to find a pause if we could do to try and alleviate the pressures on and around the community, and trying to put a buffer between that polarization between people saying never, ever, ever in my backyard, and the vulnerable people that are just looking for a place to stay, right?
Well, I just don't want to see two different standards of laws going on here, because I know if you had a campground of campers and they started partying and stuff, you'd be in there and all of a sudden there'd be fines and everything going on. I know to the south, Musquecheese, they would not allow it. So I feel with Tasquin, we do not allow it either. If these people are going to be moved, they gotta abide by the laws. There is no two-law system. So I'm hoping if we do move them, the full law is in act.
And just speaking to Mr. Nielsen there, as far as which acts we can enforce and which ones we can't, and how we can and can't, we will do what we can under those provisions. We're limited on the law too, sir, and what we can and can't do as well. So I appreciate it's not the best scenario. I appreciate where we're at here. I'm just trying to offer a temporary solution to where perhaps we can move forward into something more permanent somewhere in the city, and just giving us a bit of a pause here. That's all.
Yeah, I just wanted to be clear on that, because our residents want to be cleared on that also. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, to Keith or to Sue. One, we have no zoning for this, correct?
Through the chair to Councillor Bronco, we actually do have a zoning for temporary shelters, like a tent, like the tent city and that sort of thing that's going on. But council has the ability to do to allow whatever they want on their property through direct control.
So right now, they were said, go ahead today. They passed today, they can move in there today. But that also brings up a point. All of our own city property can be a tent city, our parks and everything else, because if we're allowing one to go to one place, nothing to say they can't go to Jubilee Park, they can't go to the Shore Park, can go by the Lake Park.
Right, so that feeds into what Inspector Drance was saying before. If we have a designated location, it makes it much easier for them to go in and say, you're not allowed here, but you're allowed there, and they will move them out.
But it's city property. If they're, I don't understand. We don't know if some of these are residents or not. I understand that. But one can say, well, this is city property, what I can't go there. It's going to be, this is a really tough, right? And to implement it, I find it very hard. But that's my safety, my zoning. My other question is, when Rock Soup was looking after these people, they have people there to feed these people or not. So we don't have nobody out there. So it's all for one, and you know, the toughest is going to win for food or supply, whatever they can get. But and the concern is there's going to be bullies there. Who's going to control the bully? Because if you got an older one who's on medical and can't, and somebody, big guy, tall guy comes in, takes it, definitely bullies in that circumstances. I still have an issue, and nobody's answered is, if we have 40 tents or 80 people there, that's what we allow. By putting what we are there, unless we zone it, we put a fence around it, we cut grass through a certain perimeter. When this gets full, that's it. But if we're gonna keep, we're not controlling who's coming in or not. So if they know they can move, you know, the Bible says, go, they will come. That's what we're doing. They're gonna come, we're gonna have more. anticipate more than 40, 50 people by the end of the month.
But what's stopping that from happening in the current location now?
There's nothing stopping, it, but we have laws that it's trespassing on somebody's land. And we as a city don't have anything to say you're trespassing.
But
We do.
You would have control over that piece of land because it's city-owned land.
So
But we also have the ability to charge and remove from a trespassing charge now. So right now they're trespassing on an adjacent property to Rock Soup. Now, given the climate in other municipalities in terms of enforcement, I encourage you to read up on what happened in Halifax. I think it was this morning. A couple of the homeless shelter locations or tent cities were shut down. Most went okay and some turned aggressive and physical. So now your job as a council is to decide how you want to direct the RCMP to handle the trespassing part of it, and whether or not we sit and wait for the stop order to go through, the appeal to be done through the subdivision appeal board, and then it goes to the Court of Queen's Bench following that. So now, as a council, it is up to us to decide what we want to do in the direction we want to give the RCMP. That's what Keith's here looking for. That's what Inspector Grants is here looking for. So speculating on what happens if we get 100 tents out on city-owned property is no different than what happens when we get 100 tents on Rock Soup's property or the property adjacent to Rock Soup. We need to have a plan in motion on what we want to do. And part of my notes here is that, let's go through what I have here on my notes. We're in this position because we didn't have an alternative location established prior to the closure of the hub. No decision made will make any of this good. All we can do is try to make it better. Right now, very little can be done on Rock Soup property. They're also trespassing on the private property next to them. The choice we get to make now is how can we make this less bad? I spoke with Leduc's mayor yesterday, and since the closure of our hub, they've also seen an increase to drug use, mental health, and the criminal activity that our downtown was seeing too. So as we close the hub, not everybody from the city or who is occupying the hub space or as a shelter has stayed in the city. They've gone to other municipalities. So all of the things that we worry about here in the city on if you build it, they will come. Leduc's had a hub and a shelter for a long time. The build it and they will come, they would see maybe 6 people a week in their shelter, and their hub doesn't get utilized. So no, it's not if you build it, they will come. We obviously have a need for it in our city. And as a council, we have to decide how we're going to mitigate that risk, look after the vulnerable population while still looking after the safety of our residents and the business owners in town. Right now, trespassing on private property isn't good. So how would you like the RCMP to handle that? Do you want them to go in there and arrest everybody and get them off the property and then have them come back to Rock Soup's property and set up their tents there if that's what they're allowing, where we don't have any control because now it's been appealed and it's going to the subdivision appeal board? So while we accept this as information, status quo isn't going to work. So we need to make a decision on what we're going to do to mitigate the risks.
If I may, Tyler, then months and months ago, we had brought that issue that there are transits coming in. If you're saying that when we shut down the hub, these transit moved from our place to Leduc, it proves that what we did brought other people, other vulnerable people to our community, which
The very nature of you calling it transient is just that. They're
Okay.
going to
move, but we were told these are all the local people we had, and we always had them in our community, and we didn't. So it's very hard. I understand it's very hard.
But how do you stop somebody from coming into a community? How do you
don't.
stop somebody from coming into a community to access healthcare, shopping, food, schools,
Well, then
parks?
you can't stop them.
You can. So that's my point is what is the option?
If we don't have a facility like that.
We didn't have a facility like that 3 years ago, and we still had a tent city and a vulnerable population
We had
taking
20
up refuge in our city.
We had 20 people. Okay, then
We had a Nichols report done and they identified at least 40 people who were homeless. And that wasn't including the couch surfers and the other people in the city that were dealing with mental health and addictions. So. Councilor Hilgren.
Through the chair to Sue. So this being in the southern part of the vacant land, there shouldn't be no conflict for our warming center, which is going to be in the north part.
There hasn't been a location identified.
No, that's what I mean. So I'm just saying that this won't affect down the road.
We're also not building a permanent structure there. If we do, if council's direction is to move or offer that property
Yeah.
as a place to set tents up, there isn't a permanent
No,
structure there. So it
but it
would,
will not close that option. What I'm trying to say, it will not close that option.
it's still council direction.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Billingsley.
Excuse me. My question is actually to Sue through the chair. Have you been working with Keith as far as what you had envisioned, either bringing on the longer with the private security and or our CPOs giving direction as far as what that's going to look like if the encampment is moved to that location, or they do choose to move to that location?
Yeah, through the chair to Councillor Billingsley, Keith and I have talked about this, and between Keith and Trent, they have really good coordinated efforts on what they're doing. The private security we're reviewing weekly, and so as I won't be here, Alan will sit with the team next week and review whether or not we need to extend that. If we're still within budget, that's a decision that will probably extend the contract to make sure that we've got some coverage for the transition. And then if we start to get close to running out of money for that and realize that we need more at the next council meeting, we would be looking for extra money on that, but we'll monitor it every week.
Okay, thank you.
Motion on the floor right now is to accept this information. Ready for the question? Those in favor? Carried. Does council have direction for administration?
Just trying to think of how to word this. I move that, I sure can. It is actually. Move closer. I move to direct administration to work with stakeholders, RCMP. I don't know how to, what, basically I want to use our land, city land, to provide an area for the vulnerable population.
Temporary?
Temporary. How? Oh, hey. Temporary. It's not shelter. The access. We have that location. Instead of saying city land, should we not possibly give that land location? Because that's the big concern here is that Tent City pops up
Where?
at,
Yeah.
pops up at Jubilee Park. That's your concern. What's right? It's here. And I think that that's critical. I mean, that's our concern. It's not in a residential area. So, Councilor Commission. Yeah, no,
Your worship, if I could add, like,
Yeah, I've got the.
I'm suggesting that location, but if you want it on the north side of that block, or if you want it on, I think, another specific location in and around that area,
In that
we're good
location,
with that.
Yeah, so in that location, council's directing our administration to work with you to find out what's going to work there.
We want to pin it down to a lat long. I'm open anywhere kind of in that area.
And so is our administration. I think so is council. I think the goal of the location in terms of addressing on that block 37A Ave and 58, whatever it happens to be. is the-
36 Ave in that block, yeah.
Okay. In that area, as opposed to saying we can have it on city land and it being in Montgomery Park.
Coincidentally, there's already a tent on the end of that street already.
What's that?
Coincidentally, there's already a tent on the end of that street already.
Oh, is there?
Yeah.
I thought you said there's already one there in reference to Montgomery Park. I was like,
No, no, no. no. On 37A Avenue, there's already a tent there. So
and that's where the shelters were set up a few winters ago, or a few summers ago.
it was a little further down, but yeah, more or less right there. Yeah.
Now, I want to speak to add to this. Keith, in your presentation, you had some things that you suggested, I guess, and that was to cut the grass, provide toilets.
Yeah, and I'm open to any other suggestions council might have on that. That was just.
Yeah, no,
me
3 of the
pulling some
4
stuff
I'm
up.
really good with. Proper sanitation is very important.
Very.
Right? Having said that, I am definitely not in favor of a fire pit. Once again, this is a place, this is not a campsite. This is not kick up the awning and have a 3-day vacation.
I appreciate your thoughts on that. And but however, all I'm trying to do is mitigate risk with regards to what if they have a fire?
Then
The nights are getting cool. It's only a matter of time before there's a campfire of some sort. And I'm only trying to mitigate that piece.
I'm still not in favor of that. So therefore, I still will add temporary access with the city to provide toilets, grass cutting, and garbage containers. Or disposal, yes.
And I'm not in favor of fire pits there either. I've also been to easily a half a dozen fires at the old tent city where there wasn't a designated fire pit set up there, where it caused more damage in the area. I also helped bring the burning barrels out to the skate shacks that were there before. My fault or my mistake was to make sure that they couldn't be moved, and that's how they got moved into the skate shack, and that's how we lost the skate shacks to fire, is because you were able to move the fire pit. Whether we put a fire pit out there or not, they're going to have a fire. If we have something that's stable, secure, and not being able to move, we can control where that fire pit is and the spread of that fire moving forward. And it'll also save you dozens of fire calls, having to go out there because you'll get burning complaints of grass on fire, piles of garbage on fire, pallets on fire, whatever else happens to be there is going to be burned to stay warm. I don't want fire pits out there at all because I don't want to have that attraction there. But if we're going to mitigate some of our risks would be having a permanent, secure, non-movable fire pit in place so that they can't burn wherever they want and whatever they want.
But would we not have security, whether it's RCMP, CPO, and or private security to make sure that there is no fires?
No.
Okay.
I mean, unless you hire a security company to sit there 24/7, it's gonna happen. And then it'll be complaint driven, there'll be a fire shown out there, and then the fire department's gonna have to go out there and put out a pile of garbage or wood or pallets or whatever it happens to be. We're going to, and I'm speaking to this with experience, that I went there a number of times, and the reason that I brought those burning barrels out there was because we had easily a dozen calls to go and deal with fire or burning complaints there. So I don't want fire pits there. I don't want to have the fire department responding out there, dealing with other things on fire, and then not having it contained so that it doesn't spread throughout either the camp or even if it's short grass that's out there. With as dry as it's been and us not getting any rain, as soon as we turn to fall, depending on how long this lasts for, the grass is going to brown up and you're going to have a grass fire that's going to roll through there anyways. So I absolutely agree with you. I don't want fire pits out there, but if we're going to mitigate risks, fire pits out there is less bad. Councilor Hilgren.
So can I suggest in there, fire pits will be on review of our fire department to assess
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
if
Yeah.
possibility of one.
Councillor Blatz.
And just to add on to that, so you're saying that non-movable fire pits is a thing and we can have those?
Pressure cone ring that weighs hundreds of pounds.
Yeah.
For sure.
Okay, thank you.
I'm sorry, your worship, I had my hand up. I don't think you saw it, but
Go ahead.
may I proceed?
Yep.
Thank you. I have two concerns. By establishing fire pits, non-movable fire pits, does that imply we're supplying wood? Or are we leaving it up to the residents to find their burning materials?
I'm saying they're gonna find burning materials regardless. If we can mitigate some of the risk of how it's spread or what type of fire pile gets put out there, then I think we should.
Well, I would hate, well, I won't go there. And I guess my other question regarding this motion, and I guess I would direct this question to Councillor Billingsley. Dean, in your mind, when you talk about provide temporary access, no, I guess I'll direct this question to Keith. If we provide temporary access and then through FCSS, there is some kind of warming shelter put together to mitigate people freezing to death. What happens to those people who, for whatever reason, want to choose to stay in their own tents?
What we found prior to the 24/7 hub that was established was we didn't have anybody camping in the city. I anticipate if it's a warm, dry place where they can get services and meals and that sort of stuff, those folks will attend there. That being said, it's the control, that city land is controlled by the city. You could withdraw your access to that and then it becomes a trespass situation. If we wanted to go down that road.
Thank you. My question to Councillor Billingsley then is, are you okay to leave temporary access in this motion, or would you prefer to see some finality to it, tied to a warming shelter?
So just for clarification, what you're saying or would like to amend would be if council provides a warming shelter, even a temporary warming shelter, that you would like to see this access revoked?
Yeah, I'd like it built into the motion, I think, only in the sense that right now what we're saying is the vulnerable population doesn't have any other location to go to where it's outside of a residential neighborhood. So we're establishing that, but in the process, we're also trying to create and look towards longer term, the cold winter months. So to me, we're creating a temporary location, providing other agencies an opportunity to start putting plans in place for a warming shelter. So one would naturally, in my mind, lead to the other. I don't want to see a warming shelter on one piece of property and a number of tents in Tent City still operating because we haven't been clear in our directions.
But if this is temporary, that's exactly it, and we could revoke at any time. So if a warming shelter is erected by the city or FCSS, allowed by the city, we could revoke this at that point. Could, I'm not saying we would, but that could be a possibility.
And regardless of whether we revoke this or not, or put a time limit on it or not, we are dealing with a situation right now where a stop order was placed on private property. Stop order was placed on a property where tents were permitted by the person leasing or renting that place. And the city has zero ability to do anything about it right now. So putting a date on it, I think, is completely irrelevant.
No, and I'm not suggesting a date. I'm suggesting that if we solve the problem for the vulnerable population by creating a warming center, then there is no need for tents, another tent city.
Even when we had a shelter, 24-hour shelter in place, we still had tents in the city.
Yes, but we have control of the tents in the city on city property.
Sure, until it gets appealed as a human rights issue, and then we deal with what Halifax is going through now. And not just Halifax, but the city of Edmonton spent months trying to get encampments taken down.
No, and I understand that. I'm just,
And I feel we can't combine the two. It's two separate identities.
all right, thank you.
Okay, to the motion. Is it clear for administration? Keith, do you feel like you have enough information and direction of council's wishes and your ability to work with administration as well as the encampments?
From a legal perspective, I'm wondering if, just to address Constable Bronco's concerns, whether or not the term provide temporary restricted access to provide toilets, grass cutting, that sort of stuff to that location. Don't know whether that helps or hinders.
With it being on city property, do we not then set the?
You can, I don't know if it's needs to be in there or not, but
One more thing to. That'll be up to Councilor Bill. Yep.
I'm okay with it as is.
Yeah.
You know where I was going with that? I was just trying to.
If it, yeah, I think I know where you're going with that, but if it's city property, do we
You already
still
have it,
have
so-
the ability to?
Yep, I'm good with that.
Anything else?
Yes, please.
Go ahead.
Could we get some clarity on this issue of fires and fire pits in this motion? I know Councillor Billingsley has said no to fire pits. There's been some discussion around the table about mitigating grass fires and all the rest of that. So as a council, where do we stand on this, and should it be included in this motion for clarity's sake?
Could I add something to that piece? Perhaps this will help. I believe there's a fire ban on in the city right now anyway, is there not? Or is? Okay, campfires only? On private property, right? I'm just wondering if that restriction will hold it until such time as that's lifted, and then they'd be allowed to have a fire.
If, in order to have a fire pit out there, there would have to be a fire pit permit granted anyways. So the city controls that regardless.
Fair enough.
So are we then saying that we're being silent on the fires at this point, fire pits?
In order to have a fire pit out there, you would have to have a fire pit permit, and that would have to go through administration anyways. So like I said, whether you grant a fire pit permit for the location, or if you set a fire pit up there or not, there's going to be fires out there.
No.
So I'm saying, I don't see where direction from council is going to change the outcome of how it goes. I think if administratively, they can go out there and see whether or not the fire pit is going to work or not. Is, I think, leaving it to administration to work through that.
That's fair enough.
Anything else? Ready for the question? Those in favor? I can't hear or see Councillor Lonsdale or Nielsen.
Nielsen raised his hand, yes.
Councillor Lonsdale.
I'm in favor, sir.
Thank you. Opposed? Carried. Anything further?
Yes, please. Could I have a last question here?
Yep.
I keep saying it's the last question, but it ends up never being that. Do we have some sense of a timeline moving forward here? And I'm not trying to be definitive that says by Thursday at 4 p.m. something's happening, but realistically, with Sue's absence and an acting CAO, and when might we expect some movement on this particular issue?
Through the mayor to council, having had experience with a tent city or tent cities, I'll be working with staff starting tomorrow with the fire chief in regards to laying out if it's possible to have a fire pit out there, following all procedures that are required. Based on where that fire pit is set up and how it's set up will determine where the tents would be located and so forth. So, and then also in regards to trying to determine the number of porta potties that would be required based on the anticipated population there in regards to the area locations. Having I've had past experience over in the last 20 months of dealing with a 10 city, dealing with homeless, I guess a First Nation homeless population.
Thank you, Alan. And I guess to Sue, where does that leave us in relation to funding and budgeting for this transition?
Through the chair to Councillor Nielsen, do you mean, I'm not sure what you mean specifically.
Well, we're talking about costs of porta potties, costs of,
Right.
The things related to setting this up that we talked about, potential windbreak fence, temporary fencing, and we talked about security. All of those items come with a cost, and is that simply born from emergency CAO discretionary funding, or is it something that you need direction from council to establish a funding baseline to move forward?
Not currently. So we do have some budget available that we can tap into for the porta potties. My thinking is FCSS and the Guiding Coalition of Homelessness are expecting to report back to council in early September. And so as we start to move towards a different solution, I don't see this solution lasting more than a month or two at the most. And so even if porta potties were $1,000 a month, Alan has some good ideas on some delineation barriers to identify the site. The garbage is just city staff time. So I don't see a large cost, more than a couple $1,000s coming out of my budget for this. So if we do by the next council meeting see that this is going to go longer or we need extra money, we would certainly ask council for that. Alan has also talked about a couple of different ideas, tapping into provincial agencies and accessing some emergency funds that they have for some of these things as well. So we'll be working on that really quickly. And I know Keith has talked to the Rock Soup and people on how quickly we can transition the tent city out of the area. So I think a lot of this stuff is going to be happening concurrently. It's I don't anticipate we'll have to get the site set up perfectly before we move everybody, but we'll continue to work with them as we set up the required services.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sue. And Alan.
Counselor Billington.
I guess more of a comment. I'm a little concerned with Ellen's comment about setting up the fire pit. It almost seemed like that was the focal point of and we kind of discussed that we may or may not have that. So to have that as your primary of setting up the encampment, I do have a problem with. To me, it's cutting the grass, whether a fence needs to be built, and then from there may or may not be a fire pit. But to have that as basing it all around a fire pit, I do have a problem.
Through the mayor to the rest of council. The rationale and why I brought the fire pit into the situation and the experience that I had, like I said, in regards to building a camp for, it included 6 camp tent sites kind of deal, which we knew that where it was set up was in a wooded area, which the municipality cleared that area, laid out some gravel and so forth, and identified a fire pit area because, as Mayor Ganem has indicated, there will be fires. And so the idea is to, before even getting it, have an idea of where you're going to put it, because if everyone comes in and then you have to set the site up a fire pit, if the fire chief is in agreement with it, and that's number one, that, you know, it's better to look at that first. If it goes in there, great. If it doesn't go in there, you know, the idea is to differentiate and identify that. And that was also in regards to the porta potties. In regard, we had 2, and identifying where they are in relationship to the potential where the tents are going to go. So yes, it's cutting the grass, getting a good feel of the lay of the land, because the more comfortable you make it, whether you want to make it comfortable or not comfortable, the less intrusive that the residents become to surrounding businesses. Because in the situation where we are involved, we've identified a site that was away from the downtown core, but there were still businesses around and they still had their concerns. Those individuals still found the way back into the center of the town, but they also every night returned to where the camp was, and the downtown businesses in this situation were very happy in that regards, because it did reduce the amount of negative interactions that were taking place. So, you know, we're not putting in $35,000 worth of tents, which was donated, which happened. They're bringing their own tents in, but again, it's trying to make it as user-friendly as possible. And the whole idea behind, if I understand correctly, in regards to Ms. Howard and where, and I say Paul's Edgington, I hope I said it, Mr. Edgington, where he's working with FCSS and identifying a spot. My understanding is this is the spot where the consideration is to put a permanent shelter, winter shelter kind of deal, and hopefully, you know, permanent housing, if this is a town site that's there. That's what's going to be coming back to council for consideration, and it gets them comfortable in that area. So there's a, hopefully I'm not speaking out of turn. This is my interpretation of the last 3 months. And based on my experience with dealing with homeless population, especially during COVID time, where we had to find a way to, you know, look after them and so forth. And in regards to, I believe that the province has a responsibility, and as I mentioned to Ms. Howard, is that we would be going, you know, talking to province in regards to funding for those things like firewood. The intent is not to provide the firewood, but having seen people take wood pallets from businesses to burn it becomes an issue that the businesses get excited. And then, the RCMP gets called in and it just aggravates the situation. Yes, it's costly. We were fortunate enough that the majority of our costs were covered by the province in the situation that I dealt with. So that's the idea, is to get the province to take some responsibility in this situation.
Anything else? Our motion to adjourn. Councilor Billingsley, those in favor? Carried. Thank you. Thank you, Inspector.
Thank you, everybody.